Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you are, and welcome once again to Nerd Week Live, the show in which we, the folks at Nerd Caliber, talk about nerd news that has happened over the past week since our last show last Tuesday. Or in this case, because there wasn't a whole lot, some stuff that we didn't get to last Tuesday from the week previous. I am Rodney Brown. I'm the editor in chief of Nerd Caliber. I am first person shooter on Facebook and Instagram as a cosplay photographer. Burley underscore adopter on Twitter for as long as that happens, and Burley adopter on Hive, which is the new one, and Mastodon. Burley adopter at newsy.social. And before we get into any of tonight's topics, first off, if you have any opinion on any of the things that I am saying or opinions on the show or the topics themselves, please feel free to jump into our chats anywhere that we are doing this. We are streaming live on YouTube. We are streaming live on Facebook Live. And we are streaming live on Twitch. On your screen right now is the URL where you can find us on Twitch, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber. We'd love to have you join us there if you have a Twitch account. We're basically just trying to build our following on Twitch to the extent that we have it on the other two platforms. But again, if you have anything to say about any of the topics that are on tonight's roster, feel free to jump into the chat. We love to see them. We do respond in time. In time with delays and all the other stuff that YouTube and Twitch and other streaming platforms put in our way. Having said that, let's get into the very first topic tonight. And the first topic is some news that dropped just today about The Witcher. This is actually, of course, from The Witcher 3, and not only that, it is from the Blood and Wine DLC of The Witcher 3. But I really like that DLC, and it is kind of in keeping with what the news is. The news is about the upcoming remake of the original Witcher game by CD Projekt Red. And in a financial filing today, they basically let the world know. You can't say they hid it, but it was not a press release. It was just a statement within the financial filing that the upcoming Witcher remake would be, quote, a story-driven, single-player, open-world RPG. Now, what's the significance of any of that? The first two things are basically the same. It was always a story-driven game. It was always a single-player game. It had multiple zones that you could access and do quests in, but in the original game, as you proceeded through quests and levels and achievements, you would move from zone to zone, and the previous zone would be, not always, but generally once you get to a certain point, locked out. So you could not go back and wander through that world or explore it or whatever, unlike The Witcher 3, which is truly an open world. You can go into any part of any of the lands of The Witcher 3 pretty much at any level if you can get through to them, and die fast, because they're probably way beyond you, or you can follow through with the gameplay and it will take you to these spots where you do your questing, but you can always come back to previous spots. I found in various playthroughs of The Witcher 3 that one of the best ways to do it is sort of play the game along with the advancement that it has for you, and then go back to the previous place that you were at before the game has taken you to another area. And there will be new higher level quests there, but also there might be quests that you just decided not to finish out because they were a little bit too challenging for you. Now you can do that. It sounds like that's what they're going to be doing with the Witcher remake. It will be more like The Witcher 3 in that it will be open world. So the game basically took place within the former capital of Redania, Vizima, and its surroundings. And so it looks like you'll be able to visit much more of that than you were able to within The Witcher 3. In The Witcher 3, you could literally go to the palace and talk to the emperor who had conquered not Redania. Harry Brady, welcome to the show. Been a while. Happy holidays. the Temeria. There we go. So you can travel around in other areas around Vizima and Temeria, whereas you can't in The Witcher 3. You're stuck to the former palace, which is now the Emperor's palace of the Emperor of Nilfgaard. So, and any of you who have played that game, you basically know all of this stuff. And any of you who haven't, I just said a lot of stuff that makes no sense whatsoever. But I am really looking forward to this because The Witcher 3 is quite possibly my favorite video game of all time. Certainly the one that I have replayed more than any others. And not counting MMORPGs, which have year-long stretches because you're playing them, on a regular basis. Of games that you can complete, The Witcher 3 is definitely high up there. Harry Brady, The Witcher 3 is the most iconic video game in a long time. I would agree. Prior to that, I think the only other sort of action RPG that I replayed close to that many times was oh, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. The follow up to Doom. Yeah, can't think of it. Made by the same company, but it wasn't Doom. It was a different game, similar gameplay mechanics. Anyway, I played that multiple times, but there's nothing I've played. I think I've gone through 4, maybe 5 complete playthroughs of Witcher 3. And the Witcher original game, all of this is based, of course, on the work of, I'm going to butcher his name if I don't have it right in front of me. Oh, stop that. There we go. Sapkowski, I think. All of his short stories and novels. And so there's an awful lot of wonderful well-built world concepts here to work with. And from what I understand, the first game, while the graphics weren't up to The Witcher 3 and the gameplay was somewhat different, it still was as deep and interesting a world as The Witcher 3. So I'm really looking forward to what the new version, I'm from what I understand, also built on Unreal Engine 5, will look like. And what it will play like. I'm hoping they add more of The Witcher 3 gameplay dynamics than the stuff in the original Witcher, which is a little bit more simplistic, sort of tab targeting kind of gameplay. I really enjoy more of the action combat gameplay of The Witcher 3. But anyway, from what I understand, since they just announced the actual development of this a few months ago, we're looking at something that will be 4 to 6 years before we get to see it. So, there'll be a lot more stuff going forward. We'll talk about it, but this isn't something that's going to happen. Harry says, The Witcher prequel series, I know it's got Michelle Yeoh. That is 4 or 5 topics up. So there was news about that. So we'll be getting to that, Harry. Pay attention. But thank you for the foreshadowing. Well done. Didn't pay anything for that either, so that's great. All right, our next bit of news is the casting of Travis Fimmel in the upcoming Dune: The Sisterhood series. In fact, we have 2 pieces of Dune: The Sisterhood news. So Travis Fimmel is going to be playing a character named Desmond Hart. I have not read any of the prequel novels that take place at this time, thousands upon thousands of years before the action of the actual book and most recent movie Dune, which sets up the development of the Bene Gesserit by these 2 Harkonnen sisters, played by Emily Watson and Shirley Henderson. So I don't know whether this character, Desmond Hart, is created just for the series, or if this is a character in any of those previous books that talk about the creation of the Bene Gesserit. But I like Travis Fimmel. Of course, Vikings, would remember him from that as Ragnar Lothbrok. You might also remember him from this, which was Raised by Wolves, the HBO series that had 2 seasons so far. I'm not sure if it's going for a 3. And of course, from Duncan Jones's World of Warcraft love letter, the movie Warcraft, and many other things. I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff. But he's a really good actor, and I'm looking forward to that. The series just started filming literally a week ago, on the 22nd in Budapest. So I guess they've got a great deal for movie making over there. But this leads us into the next bit of news, and that is just the day after our last show, they also announced that one of the co-showrunners of the upcoming series has left. Diane Ademu-John, possibly butchering the last name, hyphenated last name, is stepping down as co-showrunner. She will continue to be a producer on the show. But the other co-showrunner, Alison Shapker, is going to be the sole showrunner going forward. I'm not sure whether that says anything good or bad about the ongoing production. Frankly, Shapker has the chops to do this on her own. Shapker was executive producer on Westworld, the HBO series. She was executive producer and either co-showrunner or showrunner, depending on which season, on Altered Carbon, the first season of which was amazing on Netflix, second season of which I was less excited about. And she apparently has also worked on some of my favorite shows, Fringe, Lost, hopefully the good seasons, and Almost Human. So with that kind of a background, I don't think that I've got anything to worry about. As far as whether this means there's some sort of internal creative struggle that's going to make the show bad. But it's news to put out there. It's something that is to be of note. The description here is that Ademu-John had other projects that basically was taking up her time and wasn't going to be able to commit fully to Dune, the Sisterhood, which is currently a working title according to Deadline. That may not be the actual title upon release. And again, this is set roughly 10,000 years before Paul Atreides and the action of the book Dune. The series is also executive produced by Denis Villeneuve, so it will have undoubtedly the same sort of feel and look of the Dune movie and the upcoming Dune 2 movie, which I am very excited for. The idea that this sort of really ties into the theatrical releases, I think, is a very good thing. And honestly, anything Denis Villeneuve is involved in, so far, anything I've ever seen has been fantastic. Now, I can't imagine him being involved in something that doesn't meet his incredible standards as a film or visual media creator. The only other person in the cast that they've already cast that I know is Indira Varma. They have announced a whole bunch of people whose names I do not recognize and whose work I don't know. But Indira Varma is, again, fantastic. I've loved her going all the way back to HBO series Rome and pretty much everything she's been in since then. So looking forward to it. They just started filming. It would be great if we get this at like the end of 2023, maybe fall 2023. But they haven't stated, as far as I can see in here and that I remember, when this will probably air. So, yeah. A couple of bits of Dune news, Dune series news, that is, for you people who are out there as excited about this as I am. All right, now we are moving on to some news about, honestly, I kind of forgot this was even happening. The reboot of Escape from New York. This image, of course, is Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken in the original Escape from New York. But the news is that 20th Century Studios has picked a directing team to be the directors of the upcoming reboot of Escape from New York. And the team is called Radio Silence. And apparently they are a very hot team right now because they did the, for Paramount, they did the relaunch of the Scream movie franchise, which made $140 million and was also a critical hit. Escape from New York review. I was going to like reboot. I knew this was in the works. You know what? That was from Harry Brady. Harry, it's one of those things that I'm pretty sure we covered, and it kind of, sits in the back of my mind as something that we probably talked about. But we do so many things that sometimes they don't all sit there in the head. So Radio Silence, like I said, they made the Scream franchise. They made something else, which was apparently a critical hit I've never heard, called Ready or Not, for Searchlight. But this team is, and this is the first 3-person team I've heard of. Of course, we've got the Coen brothers. We've got the Wachowskis. We've got the Russo brothers. On Netflix, we've got the Duffer brothers. This is a 3-person, and as far as I can tell, unrelated team. Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, another hyphenated last name. Tyler Gillette, and I'm pronouncing it Gillette, not Gillette, because there's no E at the end. But I could be wrong. And Chad Villella. Escape from New York reboot should have the original actor back for this reboot. I would love to see Kurt Russell come back as something, but I don't think he could pull off Snake Plissken at his age. Unless it wasn't a reboot, it was kind of another sequel, like Escape from L.A. But, even then, he is obviously a man in absolutely fantastic shape for his age, but if you look at a lot of his roles, his beard is whiter than mine lately, and he's leaning into those kind of roles, and that's fine. And actually, I kind of like that. And if they're going to reboot it, cast some other young action star that can, pull it off. There are plenty of people out there. I haven't really thought about any sort of fan casting actually for this because, again, it hasn't really been sitting in, forward mind at all, if even in the back of my mind. So Radio Silence is doing this. They have not yet hired a writer, so we have no idea how this is going to be, whether it's going to be a fairly close story element reboot, or if it's going to take a completely different approach with a different story. They may not be rescuing the President of the United States in a prison colony of Manhattan. There may be a whole nother reason why they need to escape from New York. I kind of like the idea of that, sort of dystopian, authoritarian ruled U.S. That gives them an awful lot of things to talk about if they were going down that road. Now, I'm trying to think if... I believe, John Carpenter, who made the original and Escape from L.A., will be the executive producer of the film. It is apparently, the rights of it are owned by Studio Canal, which means they will be distributing it in other places outside of the United States, where it's probably going to be a 20th century distribution. And Studio Canal is coming up, in another piece of news that we're going to be talking about. Studio Canal is a French production studio and distribution company, not unlike 20th Century or other companies here within the United States, like Universal. Universal can make movies, or they can just distribute movies that other studios have paid to make. But again, so it's super, super early. They haven't even announced a writer. Who knows whether this directing team, Radio Silence, will still be attached by the time, 1, 2, or 3 versions of a script is ready. But it does seem to be moving along. So, fingers crossed. I'm not anti-reboot. I don't think there's anything out there that, was going to ruin your childhood if it gets rebooted. Because it's going to be a different take on a story. Some of them have been terrible. There's no question about that. But some of them have actually been pretty good. So, maybe this will fall into the latter camp. Let's hope. All right, moving on from that, we got about a week and a half ago, the first look And in fact, I missed this for our last show. It didn't show up until afterwards, and then I went, "How did I miss this?" We got our first look, the first trailer at the upcoming FX series Kindred, based on the Octavia Butler novel of the same name. And it does a great job of capturing what I have been told, I have not read the novel, is the feel of this sort of time travel science fiction story. So the story is about this young woman, Dana, living in LA in 1976, who somehow is transported back in time to a riverbank in Maryland to save a white boy who was drowning in the river, and winds up. This time frame is back during slavery and on a plantation where apparently her ancestors came from. So she winds up having to deal with that and trying to figure out how to survive, and then somehow winds up getting brought back to LA in her current timeline. That's just the start of the story. That's not how the story ends. She continues to ping pong back and forth through time, has no idea how it happens, why it happens, if there's a trigger, what the trigger is, and why that particular spot in time and place that she travels back to. And that's the sort of central mystery behind the whole story about, why this is happening to her, what it means to her, how it changes her, and so on. Absolutely considered one of the classics of early modern science fiction, and I'm looking forward to this. It is an FX production, which means I assume it's going to be on FX, but it premieres December 13th, so coming right up, on Hulu. So if our Hulu bundle hasn't canceled by then, our Disney Plus with Hulu and ESPN, I mean, we don't really do ESPN, so anyway. Hopefully I'll be watching this and we'll have a review. But yeah, if you are interested in this, check out the trailer. It's out there on YouTube and so on. You can watch it now. It looks really interesting. And you can watch the series on December 13th on Hulu and probably FX. Not being terribly clear about that in this particular bit of information. All right. Here it is, Harry. Here is the talk about what you were talking about before, The Witcher Blood Origin, which is, as you can see here, starring Michelle Yeoh. So the news is that a new trailer came out. This was the first teaser, from the first teaser. The new trailer has more of the same, really. More action. You get to see a little bit more of the different environments that they're in. But it doesn't really lay out a whole lot more of the story that I could tell. And this is a new story. It's based on elements of lore from the Witcher books and stories, but this is all completely new telling of stuff that is literally just sort of mentioned in passing or as legends and so on. They call it a series, and it's coming up on Netflix. It is a 4-part series, which, to me, that's a limited series, and is probably what it will be cast as in any upcoming award season. But it comes from the showrunner and writer is Declan DeBarra, who the only credit they list here in this article is Netflix's Iron Fist. Now, I don't know that I don't know that he was the showrunner of Iron Fist, but I don't know that the writers and showrunners behind Iron Fist were the problem with that. It was, as far as I remember, written about as well as some of the others. I mean, it wasn't like Jessica Jones, which was drawing from the brilliant comic Alias, drawing a lot from Alias. It sort of created its own story around Danny, inspired, Iron Fist, Danny Rand, inspired by the actual details of, the earlier comics. The problem with that was the casting, mainly of Finn Jones as Danny. So I don't know that the fact that Declan DeBarra is the showrunner and writer of this is a problem. but we'll have to see. So as we said, Michelle Yeoh stars as Shan, a sword master, an elf, and last of her tribe. You've got Sophia Brown and Lawrence O'Furin as it looks like Ellie and Fial, who are two warriors estranged from their opposing clans. And the description here in this NME article says it's set 1,200 years before the events of The Witcher. We know that. We know that it is about the creation of the prototype Witcher. But it says, and events leading up to the conjunction of the spheres. Any Witcher lore experts out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but the conjunction of the spheres happened, which is what brought most of the monsters and humans and the men into the land of the elves, the world of the elves, was why the Witchers were created. That the conjunction happened first, and the Witchers were created to help defeat these monsters that came in with the humans and other things. I may be wrong. I haven't read the books, so please, anybody who's an expert on this, correct me. Let me know. But I think this article has those two things swapped in time. I am looking forward to this quite a bit. I think they did an excellent job with the animated The Witcher, the Nightmare of the Wolf. Was wonderful. I think they did a fantastic job with that. And so the Witcher universe outside of the games and the books is doing pretty well. Netflix series is up and down, and of course the latest news about Henry Cavill leaving after this upcoming season airs, which they've just finished filming. That's going to be sad. But they have fixed a lot of the problems. They had fixed some of the problems with season 1 and season 2 and introduced some other problems, to be fair. So season 4 with Liam Hemsworth, if they continue to fix non-main character seasonal problems, it could be a good season. I'm not really holding my breath on that, but we'll see. But their spin-off stuff, based on literally just one, Nightmare of the Wolf, was really solid. So, fingers crossed that Blood Origin turns out to be just as good. So again, it was coming out December 25th, Christmas. What a Christmas present. On Netflix. So we get to see, whether this is in fact worthwhile. It's 4 episodes, so you could stream the whole thing on Christmas Day after you open presents. So go to town. All right, and our last topic is about this particular guy. If he clicks on the right thing right here, this is the sea captain Corto Maltese from the comics and graphic novels by the Italian creator Hugo Pratt, mostly done in the 60s and 70s, as I recall. And the news is that Frank Miller is going to be behind the creation of a live-action series adaptation of the Corto Maltese comics and graphic novel series. I had mentioned before Studio Canal. Studio Canal will be the studio behind this. The executive producer is Gemma Rogers from something called The Railway Children Return. And also executive producer would be Selene Thomas, the CEO of Frank Miller, Inc. Frank Miller created this year his own production company called Frank Miller, Inc., which is in comics and all sorts of things. Overseeing visual effects, it says here, is Phil Tippett from Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Willow, etc. And this year's, I understand, one of the most disturbing stop-motion animated projects called Mad God. which I have not yet seen. It's in one of my for your consideration bins, and so I'm definitely going to watch it. But I'm told it's out there, and apparently Tippett's been trying to make this thing for decades. Um, but anyway, with Phil Tippett behind it, that's really good. Um, yeah, so Hugo Pratt, Ugo Eugenio Pratt, or Hugo Pratt, um, launched the series in 1967. It's about the sea captain in the very early 20th century. I think the last story takes place in 1927. The first one takes place I think, during the Russo-Japanese War. This is what, 1907? And it's about his adventures all around the world, which sort of apparently, from what I've read, mirror Hugo Pratt. He born and raised in Italy. He lived in England for quite a while. He lived in France for a while. And then traveled all over the world. He lived in Argentina for a while, where he was actually a teacher in Buenos Aires, and explored the Amazon and so on. He was a big, big traveler and explorer, and apparently an awful lot of his experience goes into the works of Corto Maltese. This Deadline article describes the main character as a very complex character. Not a typical, comic book-esque type of character. Luminous, hello. Hello all. I hope the series is a fun adventure. I agree. I hope it is too. So the reason this is the final topic is because of Frank Miller, of course. Frank Miller is still considered a very controversial person within the comic book world and just general nerddom. His portrayal of non-Spartans in 300 has come under an awful lot of criticism. His comments about Muslims in 2011 on the 10-year anniversary of 9/11 were pretty Islamophobic. He has since, in 2018, apologized for those things and said that was a very, very dark time in his life, and he absolutely regrets ever having said anything like that, it was an incorrect view. Does that make it better? Does that negate the fact that one of the top comic creators in the world at the time was, at least in one quote, and he never really went and explained that any deeper, two quotes actually, was pretty obviously Islamophobic or expressing Islamophobic views? He is a, he is a lightning rod of a creator. I think that some of Frank Miller's works are some of my absolute favorite things in comics. Some of them are borderline unreadable, or unwatchable. Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, he finally got actual full director credit for. He's not a director, and the one thing he did that with Robert Rodriguez. The one thing he did solely on his own, not Shadow, the other one, the other classic guy that was wearing a mask. Oh, come on. Can't remember the name of the movie at the moment. But it was awful. It was unwatchable. Now he's not directing any of this as far as I know. He is behind it as like the show creator. So essentially we would call him showrunner. And he's probably going to be writing a fair amount of it. But we'll find out later on whether or not he is in fact going to be a director on any of the episodes. I looked into Hugo Pratt, wondering whether or not there was any of the controversy that surrounds Frank Miller in his work. And that seems very much not to be the case. he has, because the characters or the stories are set in the early 20th century, in many cases when he presents indigenous people, they are fairly primitive. They are non-technological societies, but that would reflect how many of those indigenous people would be in the environments where the captain, Corto Maltese, is trying to find them, or is finding them, in the Amazon, in Peru, and so on. He also has, in just looking through some of the pages of his work, a fairly broad representation of quite a mixed, diverse cast of people in the civilizations, in Paris, in Rome, and so on, where Corto Maltese might find himself. Obviously, in one segment, and probably I would assume a fairly important part of the story, a fairly wealthy black woman. So I don't think that any of those potential troubles that surround Miller, okay, definite troubles that surround Miller, for some of his potential views, come from Pratt at all. So, and again, I have not read this. Thank you, Ralph, who in the event on Nerd Caliber, the event page for this, commented that he absolutely loves the Corto Maltese books. So, yeah, we'll have to see how this plays out. They're just now announcing it. It's, who knows when it's going to happen. The Spirit. Thank you, Luminous. Yes, The Spirit was unwatchable, so we'll have to wait and see how the series goes. Oh, God, that was so bad. Just terrible. But yeah, so Frank Miller, the upcoming MCU Disney Plus Daredevil series, Daredevil Born Again, at least the title and seemingly some of the story and tone are going to be based on Frank Miller's Daredevil Born Again series. And that is right up there with one of my absolute all-time favorite arcs of any comic book. So, do I not watch Daredevil, the MCU Daredevil, because it's seemingly very closely based on a Frank Miller work? No. And I'm not going to not watch this because it's based on a completely different creator's work. It's, Hugo Pratt's Corto Maltese stories. By the way, when I first saw this, when it first popped up in my email, I went, why are they making a series about that island in the DC Comics where Frank Miller set the big conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in The Dark Knight Returns? I had no idea that Corto Maltese was a character from a graphic novel series that Frank Miller loves, and that's why he took the name and named this island nation Corto Maltese. So, but now I know. And now I know this has nothing to do with the island of Corto Maltese, which is still in the DC Comics. It has morphed on from Frank Miller's original, dropping it into a sort of an alternate universe story of The Dark Knight, into, a fairly regular player in an awful lot of DC and DC EU content. But yeah, so we don't know when this is happening, or if it will continue to get off the ground. And even though Studio Canal is producing it, we don't know where it's going to land. They've got to get a deal with a streamer or a television station or something. It sounds like it would be right up Netflix's alley. They don't shy away from controversial creators, so you may wind up seeing it on Netflix. But, it could go somewhere else. We'll let you know when we find out. So that's it, folks. That's the show for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks, everybody, Harry and Luminous, for the chats. We will see you at an upcoming show. We will see you at an upcoming event. Was it, maybe it was last weekend, or is it this upcoming weekend? We have a team at PAX Unplugged, whether it just happened or whether it's happening this weekend. I can't recall. And I think that's it for us until we get into Aresia here in Boston in early January. But anyway, before we go, we'll ask you to take a quick look at, yes, we'll get to that too, Luminous. Take a quick look at our Patreon page, patreon.com/nerdcaliber. Love to have you as a patron if you like to do that sort of stuff. We only have 3 tiers, $2 for the lowest tier. Helps us get to more cons to create more content, so we can have other things up here on YouTube for you to watch instead of me talking about nerd stuff in movies and games and comics. As Lumina says, watch out for viruses. LA is having a peak right now of flu, COVID, and the, unfortunately, mostly child-striking RSA virus. So, don't, wear a mask. What would it hurt you to not get sick? I just don't get that. If you're out shopping, if you're in public and in a crowd, wear a mask. Keep you from catching the flu. It'll keep you from catching. Oh, and by the way, get the booster. Get the new covalent booster, which is even more effective against the later versions of the Omicron variant of COVID. And while you're at it, get a flu shot. Do all that stuff and be safe, because you don't want to go through this winter sick, and we certainly don't want to be a statistic. People are still dying, folks, from COVID. Don't pretend it ain't happening. Go look it up. Anyway, yes, Luminous, good night. Good night, everybody. Have a safe week. Have a fun weekend. And we will see you later on. Bye-bye.